Hello again, you gorgeous bastards. I hope you're keeping well. I know I haven't been making many vlogs lately. I've been tired and there's a lot going on and I'm busy. I did do one with Jerry O'Neill on this channel about his book Unvaxxed Soul, and you can have a look at that. And it was quite good. I enjoyed that. It's the previous video to this one. And buy his book and support him if you can. Now, or even just read his Substack. It's a great Substack. But it's true what they say, that the older you get, the more dead people you know. And when you get to be a certain age, around my age, people start dying around you. And there's been a lot of people I know who've died in recent years who'd be like a bit older than me, 10 years older than me. So the sort of like, you realise then that the kind of, you're in the sights at this point. And but then you see young people are dying. An awful lot of suicides. I don't know where it is where you live, but you just soldier on. It's the great mystery, isn't it? So one person that died recently was Nabil Shabban, the British actor. Those of you who have been following for a long time know that me and Nabil made a film together called Take It or Leave It, which was filmed just up here at Wickerman Studios and around it. And it was a lot of fun that working with him on that. Those who might know Nabil would he was born in Amman, Jordan, and he overcame a great disability to become like a successful actor. And many of you who are Doctor Who fans will remember him as the Thit in the Colin Baker era of Doctor Who, and he was in many films like City of Joy with Patrick Swayze. And he first came onto my radar with a film called Raspberry Ripple, about these people who were planning a bank robbery who were all disabled. And he also was fascinated. We had great discussions about Vikings. He was fascinated by Vikings. And he had this theory that Ivar the Boneless was a disabled Viking who conquered Ireland. And he made a film for Channel 4. And a lot of, it's way out there, but still, good luck to him. It's actually it's out there, and you can find all a lot of stuff on YouTube. But he died there a couple of weeks ago in Edinburgh, in where he lives. He would spend the summers here in Sligo, so that's how I got to know him, through a mutual friend. And he's a great writer too. Wrote some good books. And so, there's someone who was born with a terrible disability, but he made a life for himself. Now, we had our disagreements on, well, I don't disagree with people on politics, but his politics, he was a communist, and he wasn't shy about that. And an old-fashioned sort of like English, although he grew up in England, although he was Jordanian, an old-fashioned, ethnically, he was a commie, and I never spoke politics with him, because I'd be more kind of like libertarian, anarchist, anarcho-capitalist or something like that. But anyway, I don't fall out with people over politics, and I certainly don't judge people's humanity on their politics. It's one of the wicked. He never did that with me, I'm just saying, but some do. It's a wicked curse of our times to judge a person's entire humanity on their politics in its entirety. The left do that a lot, but he never did that with me. He was more like to go out. He was still fighting. He was one of those like English guys who was like Alan Moore. He was still fighting Thatcher. It was in his head. He was still fighting Thatcher, and which shows like the trauma that left on a certain generation that grew up in Britain. But yeah. He was a great character, a great talent, and a great personality, and a good guy, a genuine good guy. And I met him on the street one day. The first time I met him, he was selling his books on the street, and a market. And I just walked up to him and I said, I know you from that movie Raspberry Ripple. And he goes, yeah, it's me. And it was funny. But, and that's how we got to know each other and work together, at least on one project anyway. It was great fun. Take it or leave it. It's out there on YouTube. But, yeah, so you try, I was just thinking when I finished talking to Jerry O'Neill last night, I was thinking you try to, well, you do sort of like rationalize everything, whether you'd use religion, you say it's God's plan, or, any kind of thing. Those of you who've been following me for a while know that I read a lot of books on theoretical physics, not books, magazine. I couldn't read the books. I read a lot of magazines, articles, and papers on theoretical physics. I don't understand 90% of it, but it keeps me out of the pub, and it stops me from getting into fights in pubs. But there's a new theory emerging, sort of like a quantum condensation theory, and it's quite interesting. Basically, the theory revolves around the fact that this reality, and I quite like it a lot. I like the idea a lot because it ties in with a lot of the kind of things I believe about magic and consciousness and sort of like even human behavior. We don't actually live in the universe proper. What we live in is a condensation, is the word they use, or a sort of like a trace of a super universe that exists above us, and this super universe is not the field of all potentiality. It is the actual manifestation of all potentiality. It's like the pure universal experience, phenomena, state. Everything has happened. It's like a super version of reality. We don't live there. We live below it in a sort of a twilight zone of quantum condensation. And so what we have here is not an emergent universe. Things are not emergent. What we're seeing is almost like the smoke or the condensation or the steam of the super universe, and we're in it, and we've resolved it into this using our nervous system and our five sense reality. Now, within this, there's three. They talk about there's three universes or three dimensions, and below this is a sort of like the inverse version of the super universe above us, and we're in the middle, and between both is what we would traditionally call in esoteric language the abyss or the void. So high functioning, highly brilliant people, they live at the top of this condensated quantum field, and they're able to snatch the fire Promethean-like of the gods and bring magic into this world because they're closer to the super experiential universe, the super manifestation, the ultimate expression of everything. And they can grab the fire of Prometheus now and again and bring it down because they operate at the top of this condensated quantum field. So people up there would be like Kate Bush, Joan of Arc, all the truly great artists, thinkers and writers, Muhammad Ali, great sports people, with their, these kinds of people, they have tremendous charisma, and they can bring new things into the world, the magicians and the great creators. In the middle would be me and people like the rest of us who are just trying to survive. And then below us would be people who are rather than snatching and grabbing the fire of Prometheus, they're on the edge of the abyss, basically on the cusp of the demon world. And rather than up at the top catching the fire of the gods, the charisma, they're scraping the floor with the demons. And these would be like people who are like political, like fanatics, religious fanatics. The types who go around calling people fascists for no reason. These types, the art that exists down there would be like the lowest art. It would be like, the worst manifestations of the fashion industry. Have you seen what like Miley Cyrus looks like lately? With that Vogue shoot or her magazine did it? That kind of weird stuff, like Will Smith's son wearing castles on his head. The lowest form of debased creation. Upper middle class, neurotics doing slam poetry events, rhyming about their daddy issues and Trump. At the bottom, digging, the kind of like the low-level truthers who have, become the one. They think that the purpose of being a truther now is attacking everyone else and, making videos attacking them and writing articles attacking them. And they contribute nothing positive. Or people like that, the critical types who just like, they're not doing anything for themselves, but they're definitely down there digging in the dirt. And so they be on the cusp of the demon world. And this is like and then you have people who could fall from the top, to the bottom. Now I'm using metaphor here, of course, but it's just, it sort of explains a lot. Someone who may have been really good at one time or had a greatness and descended into the world of like that kind of sort of negative, debased thinking. I think a lot of lefties who have promise as writers and filmmakers, these kinds of people, they end up becoming obsessed with left-wing politics. And you can have it on the right wing as well. Once you think, I've met very few people who are genuinely racist. And by that, I mean they hate people of different colours. I think I've only met one who was a copper in New York, and he absolutely hated black people to the point where it was making me sick being around them. And but no one else. Everyone else is just either just stupid, ignorant, or not really driven necessarily by pure hatred. But a lot of lefties are driven by pure hatred. Very much so. It's very much a hatred thing. And so they descend lower and lower till they reach the demon world. And you can see them actually twisting and distorting. And they might have started out in life looking all right. But as they get down towards the demon world, they be twisted. They've called everyone they call everyone a fascist and everyone a racist, until they start realizing that the only people they're surrounding themselves with are starting to call them fascist and racist. It's a zero-sum game, race to the bottom, and then they find out that they commit suicide and things like that. Because there's nothing. So they had great promise in life. They got sucked into the spiral of Bolshevik leftist politics, spiraled down, calling everybody a racist, a bigot, or a fascist, or a homophobe, until they were surrounded by just the same kind of personality types. And they were on the cusp of the demon world, becoming increasingly more hostile, increasingly more worn out, until they just ended themselves, dissipated. A lot of reasons why I think there's such a high rate of suicide, and please don't think I'm saying that all people commit suicide like this, but one of the reasons I think there's a high rate of suicide among leftists and atheists is because it's a way of avoiding ending up in the demon world, because that's where they're heading. They're spiraling down into the demon world, into the lower, negative quantum, and part of it, and that's constantly sucking from. That's like almost like a law of thermodynamics, a law of spiritual thermodynamics. It's constantly sucking from this like middle section of quantum condensation that we live in. So that's the kind of latest theory of theoretical physics regarding this concept of not an emergent universe that we're in, but a condensated universe that we're in. And I do like the idea, and I've just thrown my own esoteric thing on top of that. But it sits in there fine with that. It sits in there fine. But yeah, it's a funny. This November is a fun. By the way, I think that gig in England has been called off. I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I think there's a problem with the venue, so that's not going to happen before Christmas. I won't be going to England. The one that was in Ledbury, I think there's something. Something happened. The venue's not available for those dates. So anyway, maybe after Christmas we'll see. And this strange period, November, is always kind of funny. There's a sort of, you see the worst kind. I noticed at this time of year, right before Christmas, you get the worst kind of debased stories in the media. You know, like, this seems to be a time where you get a lot of things about serial killers and like really debased criminals and stuff doing things around this time. And there's an almost like you have that kind of like psychopathic panic before the winter, big time. You get that a lot. If you want to know who's a pathological type, who's a predator, they usually panic around now. It's almost like a Renfielding. They're looking for food. I'll give you an example. The finance minister in this country, a guy called Pascal Donahue, a guy who loves rainbow flags and drag queen story time, suddenly resigned from his position as finance minister to join the World Bank. Now, he'd be going to the World Bank as a bottle washer. You know, it wouldn't be like, he wouldn't be going in there as a big shot. He'd be going in there, but he wanted out at any chance. Now, he was Renfielding. That was psychopathic Renfielding. He was terrified. Something in the background within the zeitgeist of the political system here is terrified. And I wonder if it has anything to do with those videos we've seen of like the Irish Citizens Army and the other sort of like paramilitary groups who are kind of like coming up and turning on the government and the establishment here. Are they really shitting bricks behind the scenes but pretending they're not? You know, I find that very interesting. I also find it very interesting that like we had a phenomenal success in soccer, the Irish national soccer team here. Basically had no chance to qualify for the World Cup. They were on 1 point in their group, and then they beat from 5 goals from Troy Parrott. They got 6 points and jumped ahead of Hungary with a last second goal, and are now in the playoffs. Now that would normally politicians in Ireland would be like, oh, it's a great thing for the country, but they've been very quiet about it. And the reason that is, it's what that's brought back is flag waving, national flag waving, and male toxic masculinity. And that's why they've been very quiet about it. Normally, in the past, politicians would try to ride that thing. I think there's a great fear behind the scenes in Irish politics. I think that they were, it's almost like, you know, they joined a gang. They joined this gang, you know, like the globalists, the WEF. And it's like, you know, fellas, the small time guys join a criminal gang, and when the shit hits the fan and things go wrong, you saw that in Goodfellas. They basically sacrifice the ones at the bottom of the gang, so they don't rat out to the police and sort of they just discard them. And so, but they always thought that the kind of lowlives at the bottom of the gang always thought that they would be in number one, you know, up there at the top, until things went wrong and suddenly they found themselves abandoned. And I think that the Irish establishment always believed that the globalist establishment would always be there for them and protect them no matter what. And now the world is changing quickly. They're last week's flavour. And suddenly they're finding themselves alone in this big bad world where they thought they were all going to be statesmen and great states players and this kind of thing, and they could like impose like draconian laws regarding free speech and everything on the Irish in Ireland, and it would all be okay because there'd be someone somewhere taking care of them. And it's probably happening in other countries too. This happens in the smaller countries like Ireland, and I think they're panicking because they're on their own now, because they basically have bullied the Irish people, especially since 2020 with the whole lockdowns and the needlecraft and everything. Thuggishly bullied them. And they pissed off an awful lot of Irish people. at an enormous level, enormous rate. And all it takes is for one the only thing that's keeping them alive are two things, or keeping them safe, is two things. The propaganda mainstream media here, which is nothing but wall-to-wall propaganda of how wonderful politicians are. It is nothing else, the mainstream media here. Coupled with the economy still good. If there's an economic collapse, they're not going to be able to survive. There's going to be questions asked. And I wonder if Pascal Donoghue, Minister for Finance, did a psychopathic Renfielding and jumped ship, because he's seen the books. And he knows that they're not going to be able to pay the bills for all these people they brought in from overseas, and financing things like the Kiev metro, where they didn't even build them. They didn't even get a shovel in the ground for the Dublin metro, for the fields, or the Irish state executing Harvey Morrison, the severely disabled child with scoliosis, so they could bring in Palestinians for the fields. The fields aren't working anymore. And it's not because the Irish have waken up. The Irish normies, like all normies everywhere, will never wake up. They're stupid. They're basically livestock, or happy being livestock. But they still have base needs. And they're still loaded with their insecurities and all this stuff. And it's going to get very interesting from this point on. I don't know what's going to happen. But all I know is that I will be certainly, and you should too, looking at the ones at the top of this quantum condensation, stealing what's worthy for the rest of us from the gods, taking it, manifesting it into this reality, and good luck to you.